Warning. The following video contains flashing lights, mild jump scares, and loud sounds. Please proceed with caution. Viewer discretion is advised. Thank you.
Hello everyone, Mara here. If you were on the web in the early or mid-2000s, then you may have come across a creepypasta at some point or another. Perhaps you were recommended a scary story by a friend. Maybe something popped up in your recommended on YouTube. Wherever or however you found out about creepypastas, I can only hope that your first creepypasta left you feeling spooked and eager to learn more about this genre of internet horror. The term creepypasta originated from the words creepy and copy and paste, as these stories were spread all around the web, or mostly 4chan, back in the day. The intent for creepypasta is to scare the reader. Creepypastas have come a long way, from creepy chain letter emails, or green text on 4chan, to semi-popular short horror stories with dedicated websites, such as creepypasta.com or their creepypasta wiki. Today, I want to talk about some of my favorite creepypastas. I'll be giving my own pros and cons to each story that I talk about, as well as a synopsis for the story. Spoiler-free, of course. Also, please don't take any of these pros and cons to heart. I am just a person who has thoughts about old horror content. The majority of the stories I'll talk about are somewhat old, and that's mostly because I haven't read any recent creepypastas in a while. With that said, let's get on with the video. A group of forum users talk about an old cartoon called Cove. The further they discuss it, the more odd memories each user recall about the show, and just how disturbing it truly was. This story right here is an absolute classic. I love the story being told through the forum/chat room. I enjoy the structure of the show coming through each user, like the odd TV station and channel that it was on, the time the show would air, which was like 4 p.m., as well as the weird villains being present in the cartoon. There was a time where people, after reading the creepypasta, thought they had actually seen Cove, but it was technically the Mandela effect taking over. The Mandela effect is when, quote, a large segment of the population misremembering a significant event or sharing a memory of an event that did not actually occur, end quote. For the cons, I only have one. I kind of wish that it was just like a little bit longer, but I also realized that this could have taken away from the ending's whole effect on the reader, such as giving away too much information so it's no longer scary. The narrator of this story works at a gas station. They talk about their odd co-worker, Jeremy. The narrator is asked by their boss to look over some security tapes due to missing motor oil in the station. The boss believes that Jeremy is the one who is stealing. Though, as the narrator watches through the tapes, something very strange is going on in each one. I love how it's a gas station horror story. Not a lot of classic creepypastas take place in a gas station, or rather, viewed from videotapes. That's another thing I enjoy. The buildup of horror occurs through the past. Also, it's a very weird story. I love it. As for cons, I understand that mystery is something good for horror, but I'm still trying to figure out why motor oil was being stolen. It's more or less a small nitpick. Background is a story about a haunted cartridge of Majora's Mask, and said haunting is by an entity known as Ben. The narrator/poster, Alex, or Jedusible, begins experiencing horrible nightmares and paranoia from continuing to play the game. The creepypasta itself has 3 arcs, which span over a full decade. From the first post to the export of 4chan on September 7, 2010, to finally ending on October 31st, 2020. The following arcs are Haunted Cartridge, Moon Children, and Awakening. The Haunted Cartridge arc is the most known arc among fans of this creepypasta, and it works well as a standalone story. I think the story works very well with the videos made specifically for it, showing off the gameplay talked about in the story. Obviously, not all the footage is entirely accurate, but it gets the point across. And this was all back in 2010, so that's some pretty impressive game hacking. Going into the cons, when comparing it to other gaming creepypastas, it does go into the small cliche of the narrator being afraid of a cartridge, too afraid to put it down, becoming paranoid, etc. Overall, it's still a very solid and interesting horror story/series. A man and woman decide to do some cave walking. As they venture through the cave, something feels off. The two are eventually separated. The man's flashlight is running out of battery, and the cave begins to feel wet and warm. Cave horror to me is very fun and interesting, and this story knocks it out of the park. There's no scary monsters, no ghosts, just a cave, something you're meant to stay somewhat safe in. As for cons, I solely dislike the beginning of the story, where the main male character is talking about his female friend in a rather, well, unnecessary manner that kind of put a bad taste in my mouth when I first read it. Overall, this is a solid scary story. When the author was a young child, they became very sick one spring. During said spring, in one of their childhood homes, they meet a strange creature known as Mr.Widemouth. Mr.Widemouth seems fun at first, but the author remembers how bizarre the creature's games became. From being told to jump on an imaginary trampoline just outside the window, to learning how to juggle knives. Eventually, the author finally moves away from the old home, leaving a sad Mr. Widemouth to look at them from the bedroom window. Imaginary friend type of horrors always fascinate me. Kids can think up very strange creatures to be friends with, so Mr. Widemouth seems like a realistic imaginary friend. The path this story takes is interesting, and I have a small theory about the home that the narrator was sick in. Perhaps Mr. Widemouth was possibly tied to the home. But we'll never really know anything about that. As for cons, I don't really have any. It's a very solid story. As it's getting dark, a hunter retires to an old cabin in the woods. The cabin is full of strange portraits. When he wakes up the next day, he's in for a shock. So here are the pros of this story. It's short, it's simple, and the horror hits you like a truck. Yeah, no, not that truck. As for cons, I don't really have any. The story is very solid and I love it. The ending is still a little bit predictable, but I don't personally mind that. This story begins with the author finding an old cartridge of Pokemon Red in their neighbor's trash. Upon booting up the game, The author is disappointed and confused about the title, Pokemon Strangled Red. The game itself takes place 1 year before the actual Pokemon Red story, with a new main character named Steven. The author enjoys this new storyline immensely, but things take a turn for the worse as the game nears its perceived end. Original takes in existing media isn't something that I saw a lot in old creepypastas. I love Steven's character and how the game began to change with him. An example of this being when the NPCs congratulate Steven on his victories, and when they try to console him when everything goes downhill. For the overall cons, talking about creepypastas in a creepypasta kind of takes me out of the story. Not by much. It's a little annoying. Thank you all so much for watching. If anyone wants to help support me, you can head to my Ko-fi in the description. I have 2 tiers. The Skull tier, a single dollar to help me out, and the Pencil tier, $5 that will get you early access to video and writing content before they're published, as well as your name in the end card of my videos. Honestly, just $1 would be a huge help. I currently have a lot more videos in the works and I can't wait to show them. That's all for now. Bye everyone.